You should have seen Ronald's face when the giant animatronic witch screamed behind him. He jumped 3 feet in the air, dropped his clipboard, and ran like he had just seen a real ghost. And the best part? The entire neighborhood was watching. Someone even filmed it. And by the next morning, the video had gone viral. That was the exact moment the HOA decided to lift their ridiculous Halloween ban. But before that happened, let me tell you how it all started. It began 2 weeks before Halloween. I walked outside one morning, coffee in hand, ready to hang my first decorations, when I noticed a bright yellow envelope taped to my mailbox. Great, I thought. Nothing says good morning like a letter from the HOA. I opened it and read, "Effective immediately, all Halloween decorations are prohibited. They disrupt community harmony." I actually laughed out loud. Community harmony? What are we, a yoga retreat? Then I saw the fine amount printed in bold, $250 per day for violations. That was when the coffee almost came out of my nose. Apparently, the HOA president, Ronald Peters, had decided that Halloween was too chaotic for our peaceful suburban neighborhood. This is the same man who once fined my neighbor for leaving his garden hose visible. So of course he saw my 12-foot skeleton and thought it was the end of civilization. Now, Halloween is a big deal for my family. Every year, we go all out. Fog machines, glowing pumpkins, sound effects, the whole haunted yard experience. Kids love it, and even the adults stop by just to see what we come up with. So, I tried to be polite. I sent Ronald an email. "Ronald, Halloween brings the community together. Can we make an exception?" 6 minutes later, I got his reply. "No exceptions. Rules are rules." That was when my patience ended. If the HOA wanted to ban Halloween, then I was going to make Halloween impossible to ignore. I called my old college buddy Dave, who works in movie set design. When he answered, I said, "How do you feel about turning my front yard into a full-blown horror movie?" He laughed, thinking I was joking. I said, "I am dead serious. The HOA banned decorations, so we are going big." 2 days later, Dave pulled up with a truck full of props, animatronic zombies, sound rigs, motion sensors, and enough fog machines to make the neighborhood look like a swamp. For a week straight, we worked at night. We built a giant coffin with a skeleton that would rise when someone walked by, and we set up a hidden speaker under the bushes that whispered, "Get out," every time someone got close. Ronald would stand on his porch every evening, arms crossed, watching like a villain in a spy movie. One night he shouted, "You are in violation of HOA policy." I smiled and said, "Then you better write fast, Ronald, because this violation comes with lightning and zombies." He stormed back inside. Finally, the big night came, October 28th, 2 days before Halloween. I flipped the switch right at sunset. Instantly, thunder echoed, fog rolled across the street, and red lights flashed from the windows. Kids screamed and laughed, parents clapped, and even people from nearby blocks started driving over just to see it. It was pure chaos. Beautiful, hilarious chaos. Then, right on cue, Ronald showed up. He came marching down the sidewalk with his clipboard and flashlight, shouting, "Turn this off immediately! You are violating multiple sections of the HOA code." The crowd was too busy laughing and taking photos to listen. I told him, "Ronald, relax. It is all temporary. One night of fun never hurt anyone." He snapped back, "You are disrespecting the community." And that was the exact moment Dave triggered the motion sensor behind him. The giant witch turned her head, glowing red eyes locking on Ronald, and screamed at full volume. Ronald jumped so high, he dropped his flashlight, tripped over a pumpkin, and ran off screaming down the street. The crowd went wild. Someone shouted, "That is the scariest thing I have seen all year." And that, my friends, was the moment Halloween was saved. By the next morning, a video of Ronald's encounter was everywhere. 50,000 views in one night. People commenting things like, "HOA gets haunted," and "justice served." Apparently, even the local news station mentioned it during their Funny Stories segment. That same afternoon, I got another letter from the HOA, but this time it was different. It said, "Due to community feedback, the Halloween decoration ban will be lifted effective immediately." Ronald had tried to defend his decision in an emergency meeting, but the rest of the board members voted against him. One of them even told me privately, "That witch clip was the best thing I have seen in years." A few days later, Ronald's wife stopped by with a tray of cookies and said quietly, "For the record, I loved the decorations." That weekend, I hosted a neighborhood spooky night. Families brought candy, kids ran around in costumes, and the whole street lit up like a Halloween carnival. Everyone was laughing, taking pictures, and enjoying what the HOA tried to take away. I stood on my porch, watching it all, smiling to myself. That old HOA letter, the one that started it all, is now framed in my living room, right beside a photo of Ronald sprinting from the witch. Every October, when I pull out the fog machines and the Thunder soundtrack, I think back to that night and laugh. The HOA may have rules, but some traditions are just too powerful to ban, and Halloween will always be one of them. After Ronald's meltdown that night, I figured things would cool down. Maybe he would calm himself, accept the fact that Halloween was here to stay, and move on. Oh, how wrong I was. The very next morning, I found him pacing outside my house with a tape measure and a notepad. He was scribbling like a detective at a crime scene. When he saw me, he said, "Your fog machine violates the neighborhood air quality policy." Air quality policy? It was theatrical fog. I told him, "Ronald, it is literally vaporized water." He glared at me and said, "Rules are rules." Then he took pictures of my house from every angle like he was gathering evidence for a court case. It was absurd. People were driving by just to take photos of the haunted setup, and there he was, crouched behind my mailbox like a wannabe spy. Later that day, I got another letter. This one said, "Failure to remove your Halloween display within 24 hours will result in legal action." Legal action. Over pumpkins and skeletons. I almost framed that letter too. Instead, I walked over to my neighbor Sarah's house. She is the kind of person who always knows what is going on. I asked her if she heard about Ronald's latest drama. She rolled her eyes and said, "Everyone has. Half the neighborhood saw him trip over your pumpkin last night." We both laughed until she said something that made me pause. "Honestly, I think the board is getting tired of him too." That sparked an idea. If the HOA board was fed up with Ronald, maybe it was time to show them how much the neighborhood actually loved Halloween. So, I posted a quick message on our community Facebook group. "If you want Halloween decorations back, stop by my place this weekend for a spooky get-together. No tricks, just treats." Within an hour, my notifications exploded. Dozens of comments like, "Finally, someone said it! We miss Halloween! Count us in!" It was perfect. When Saturday came, I turned my front yard into an unofficial Halloween block party. There were kids in costumes, families bringing snacks, someone even brought a popcorn machine. And yes, my giant skeleton was still guarding the front lawn, standing tall and proud like a symbol of rebellion. About an hour into the fun, the crowd suddenly went quiet. Ronald was marching down the street again, clipboard in hand. You could feel the tension shift. He walked right up to me and said, "You are violating community standards." I said, "Ronald, you cannot fine me for having people over." He narrowed his eyes and said, "You are encouraging civil disobedience." Civil disobedience? This man was acting like I had started a revolution. But before I could answer, one of the kids, probably 8 years old, tugged his sleeve and said, "Mister, do you not like Halloween?" Ronald froze. The crowd stared. The kid continued, "My mom says you are scared of the decorations." The entire crowd burst out laughing. Even some of the other HOA board members who had shown up could not hold it in. Ronald's face turned as red as the plastic devil horns on my mailbox. He muttered something about documenting violations and stormed off again, tripping over a power cord on his way out. It was beautiful. The next morning, I got another HOA notice, but this one was oddly polite. "Dear resident, we appreciate your enthusiasm for the holiday season. The HOA board will be meeting to review the current decoration policy." Translation: Ronald got roasted by the neighborhood, and the board was finally stepping in. Later that evening, Sarah called me. She said, "You will not believe what I heard. Ronald called an emergency meeting, but the board voted him out of his position as president." I nearly dropped my phone. Wait, what? He is gone? Yep, she said, laughing. Apparently, the video of him running from your witch played a big part. Poetic justice at its finest. The next day, I saw him packing up his decorations. Not Halloween ones, his own garden ornaments. Turns out he decided to step away from community responsibilities. No one missed him. Within a week, the new acting president sent a letter that said, "Halloween decorations are once again permitted. Thank you for your patience and community spirit." Patience was not exactly the word I would use, but I appreciated the gesture. Halloween night finally arrived. The whole street lit up with decorations, orange lights, inflatable ghosts, even a pirate ship someone built out of cardboard. The best part? The HOA sponsored it. They even gave out free candy bags with "Happy Halloween from your HOA" printed on them. I just stood there, grinning, watching kids run from house to house. Neighbors who had barely spoken before were laughing together, sharing stories and taking photos with my giant skeleton. Sarah walked up and said, "You did this, you know." I shook my head. "No, we all did. I just gave Ronald a little push," she smirked. "A push and a witch." We both laughed. As the night ended, I looked around at all the glowing decorations, the sound of laughter echoing down the street, and I felt that satisfying peace, the kind you only get when you stand your ground for something fun, something harmless, something that brings people together. Halloween was not just saved, it was reborn. And somewhere out there, Ronald was probably still flinching at the sound of cackling witches, because now, every October, someone in the neighborhood plays that witch sound effect just for him. Tradition, I guess. For weeks after Halloween, people could not stop talking about it. The neighborhood had not felt that alive in years. Kids who never played outside before were now riding bikes together. Neighbors who used to wave politely from a distance were now having barbecues. And everyone had one shared story. Remember when Ronald tried to ban Halloween? It became a legend. Even the new HOA president, Mrs. Lopez, brought it up during the next community meeting. She said, "I think this neighborhood rediscovered its spirit, and no rule should ever take that away." That line got a standing ovation. It was probably the first HOA meeting in history where people actually clapped. But you know what was even funnier? Ronald still lived here. Oh yes, he did not move. He just kept his head down, avoided eye contact, and never said a word about decorations again. One evening, a few weeks later, I saw him walking his dog past my house. He looked at my front yard, which by that time had Christmas lights halfway up already, and said quietly, "Going all out again, huh?" I smiled. "Always." He sighed and said, "You really got me good." Then he chuckled. That was the first time I had ever heard Ronald laugh. It was awkward, forced, but real. I said, "Ronald, you could always join us next Halloween." He waved his hand dismissively, but I swear there was a little smile under that serious mustache. The next Halloween came around faster than I expected. This time it was not just me decorating. Every house on the block had something spooky: giant spiders, glowing skeletons, motion sensor ghosts, fog machines, even a mini maze someone built out of cardboard boxes. It was like our street had become a Halloween festival, and right in the middle of it all stood Ronald. No, seriously. He was standing in front of his house, setting up a small display. A single pumpkin with a simple face carved into it. When I walked over, he shrugged and said, "Figured I should at least try to fit in this year." I smiled and handed him a string of orange lights. He hesitated for a second, then said, "Fine, but only because my wife likes them." By the end of the night, his yard looked surprisingly good. Nothing over the top, just tasteful, classic Halloween charm. And the best part? When trick-or-treaters came by, he gave out full-sized candy bars. People started calling him the Candy Guy. He went from being the villain of the story to a local legend. That night, as the last few kids headed home, Ronald walked over to me again. He looked around at all the decorations, the laughter, the lights flickering across the street, and said something I never thought I would hear from him. "You were right. Halloween is kind of special." I said, "Told you. Sometimes rules need a little shaking. He chuckled. Yeah, well, just do not tell anyone I said that. We both laughed. And that is when I realized something important. Sometimes people do not fight because they hate fun. Sometimes they fight because they are stuck in a mindset, afraid of losing control, afraid of change. But when they finally see the joy they were blocking, they soften. The following week, the HOA newsletter featured a photo of our street, fully decorated with the headline, "Community Spirit Shines Through Halloween Celebration." It was official. Halloween was now an HOA-approved holiday, and guess who took the photo for the newsletter? Ronald. Apparently he had a new hobby, photography. He even joked about starting a holiday aesthetic committee. We all thought he was kidding, but he actually showed up with a clipboard again, only this time it was to help coordinate decorations for Christmas. Talk about a character arc. A few months later, I was at a neighborhood barbecue when someone new asked, "Hey, what is the story with that huge skeleton everyone talks about?" Before I could answer, Ronald, yes, Ronald, jumped in and said, "Oh, that thing started a revolution." Everyone laughed, including him. From that day on, it was like the great Halloween battle had never happened. Except, of course, for the small reminders that still pop up every October. Like the sound of the witch's cackle echoing from random houses, or the little pumpkin emoji people now add next to Ronald's name in the community chat. Tradition, I guess. But for me, the best part of the whole thing was realizing that a simple act of defiance, decorating my yard, somehow brought a whole community together. We all learned that sometimes the best way to stand up to rigid rules is not with anger, but with creativity. And sometimes the scariest people are not the ones in the haunted house, but the ones who forgot how to laugh. Now, every year, as I plug in my fog machine and set up that giant skeleton, I smile and whisper the same thing. Here's to the holiday that survived the HOA. And if you listen closely, just before the witch starts laughing, you can almost hear Ronald's voice in the distance saying, "Keep the fog away from my roses."